Welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Nearly 24 Russian drones breached Polish airspace, forcing NATO jets to act and Warsaw to invoke Article 4. Allies showed solidarity, yet President Trump's remark that it might have been a mistake unsettled many in Europe. What does the U.S. reaction mean for Poland and NATO unity? Joining us today on TVP World is Marcin Puszczynski, Director of the Center for Diplomacy and Negotiation, a leading expert in transatlantic security policy. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Good afternoon. Happy to be with you.
So, Washington's message is really cryptic, or specifically, Trump's statement have been very hard to read. Ever since the attack, his first post on social media is in the line of "here we go," and then he says this could have been a mistake. And recently, you've also mentioned that his patience for Putin is running out. How should we go about interpreting these messages, and what's behind them?
Well, I would really take two things apart, which might sound a little weird, but it's a little different from what we see from Donald Trump and hear from his statement, and what we could call as Washington's reaction or the U.S. reaction. And I think what is really important is to look how effectively NATO has responded as a whole, including the US, which is of course the strongest force in NATO, as a joint alliance responding to the attack. These were US planes, it was supported by US intelligence, it was all done in NATO collaboration, and it worked effectively. We've just seen a press conference with the Allied Chief of Forces in Europe, of course a US general, standing next to Rutte, who presented the whole plan of strengthening the Eastern flank support in preventing future attacks and building up the whole wall of defenses with additional ally support, including the US's one, which has been also pledged by members of the US cabinet. So in terms of the response to the incident on that level, it has been, I would say, flawless and has been extremely strong, which is very important to note and underline. Now, when it comes to the statement from Donald Trump, I think we've become used to those, let's say, not clear remarks that could be read in many ways. It's part of Donald Trump's style. He wants some ambiguity at certain moments, and because he has an imagination that he is still in a peacemaking role with Ukraine, perhaps he's clinging onto an idea that Russia might have done this not on purpose. Of course, it has been on purpose. It's almost impossible to see it in any other way. So, of course, a statement like this has some worrisome effects. It definitely requires a gentle but clarifying response, which came from Poland and from a number of other sources. We've seen Minister Sikorski, we've seen Prime Minister Tusk, who've diplomatically but still have underlined that unfortunately, well, it's very clear that this was an intentional incident. It was an intentional attack. This wasn't just an accident. But nevertheless, we would all prefer for Donald Trump to also make that statement very, very clearly rather than add his ambiguity. We still have to remember that we have heard from him at the same time when he's making those remarks, him saying that he's growing impatient with Vladimir Putin, that he is ready to impose more sanctions, that he's ready to increase potentially support for Ukraine. When it comes to his role in ending the conflict, in ending the war, which of course he's pursuing, well, not really effectively as we could see, but still his support in terms of the integrity of the alliance, in terms of the defenses of the alliance, has been extremely clear. And recently, in his meeting with the president of Poland, and during a recent phone conversation after the attack, Donald Trump has stated that the U.S. Will continue providing security guarantees to Poland, will continue to fulfill its obligations from the NATO alliance, and is even ready to increase potentially its presence in the eastern flank. Let us hope that this incident will accelerate any talks in this regard.
Right. How are the allies and the NATO members reacting to some of these more ambiguous statements? Do you think that it impacts the perception of unity now that the biggest member fails to have a very strong response to it?
Well, again, I would underline that it all clings around this one word from Donald Trump, but I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow we will hear from him that, oh no, actually, you know what, this must have been intentional, not unintentional. It looks like, this is, so I'm of course paraphrasing a little bit here, but you can imagine this. So the world has been used to sort of looking at those statements with a little bit of distance. I'd encourage us to hear what Mark Rutte was saying. He was pressed today, the Secretary General of NATO, known as Trump Whisperer, and he was pressed saying about those words, like they show the lack of unity. Is it a question like was there intent or not intent? I mean, we're moving into a speculation zone where Rutte rightly so answered that he won't be pulled into this because it's a secondary question here. Even if theoretically there was no intent, whatever has happened shows complete recklessness, shows as the result of ongoing Russian aggression, and is something that cannot be accepted on NATO territory. And the US has responded with all other allies in NATO in shooting down the danger coming into NATO territory, and immediately within days, literally, 1.5 days, has initiated new programs with several countries providing more support for air policing, for planes to monitor the airspace in the eastern flank, for more equipment to potentially shoot down, as the head of NATO forces in Europe said, both kinetic and non-kinetic. So it is a very strong response, including an American one, and I think that needs to be really the focus. At the same time, of course, there should be continued dialogue, and we would all wish that Donald Trump would shift his narratives more towards a clear blame on Russia rather than his game of ambiguity. But again, we have witnessed it for many months now, and I think more and more allies are simply used to the fact that they need to be working with these type of potential statements.
Right now, within Trump's Republican Party, there's a very minor yet not unsubstantial portion of people who are skeptical of Ukraine and the support of Ukraine. And of course, some narrative is making the waves that this attack could even somehow be a false flag. How much do you think these voices could affect Trump administration's decision making, or do you think they also see it as sort of an afterthought as much as we do here in Europe?
Well, these are groups, a lot of them which follow conspiracy theories, some part of them part of the isolationist movement. Now, these are ones that need to be, of course, dealt with in terms of counter narratives. But and I wouldn't say that their importance is dominating within the party, but it's important enough that that Donald Trump needs to sometimes, sorry to use the term, throw them a bone, and this needs to be understood by a lot of allies, that it is a reality. At the same time, Congress, a majority of the Congress is on the opposite side. They're ready to provide more support for Ukraine. They're ready to provide more support for NATO and the Eastern Flank in order to deter Russia from its attacks. The bill for more sanctions on Russia is prepared jointly by the Republicans and Democrats and is championed by a majority of the Republicans. It is ready for Donald Trump's decision to move forward with it. So although this group of, let's say, hardcore hardcore MAGA supporters, isolationists who are pushing a little bit this agenda that you just mentioned, I don't think their impact is that significant. It's important enough for the president to mention and to communicate with them from time to time. I think what's more important is that these groups push forward a lot of narratives that are pushed via Russian channels of disinformation and trying to sow discord and trying to put blame or shift blame into places where it's not needed. And this type of issues are not just in the US. We see this in Europe. We see those narratives being pushed in Poland and in countries around us. And this drone attack that we've witnessed was concurrently happening with a major disinformation campaign and trying to see, this was a stress test for not just for our defenses, but for the politicians and more broadly for the society. To what extent it's going to get pulled into warmongering or fear-mongering and ideas that this is pulling Poland into the war, that this is the fault of Ukraine. We have to be very cautious about this type of narratives happening and communicate very, very clearly, both from Polish authorities and more broadly from media and opinion-making circles, including influencers, to make sure that those type of narratives are early on identified, that there are quickly counter narratives being produced, and that they're spotted on as spreading disinformation and as targeted to sow discord and to divide societies, because this is the objective of our enemy. This is the objective of Russia.
All right, thank you so much for your input and insight. And like you aptly mentioned, even though the messaging coming from the White House seems to be a little bit more ambiguous, the action on the ground is substantial action taken by the United States in aid of Poland. Thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.